You can actually buy a private island for less than the price of a house in most major US cities. Some listings start under $200,000. But the island itself is almost never the real cost. The real number shows up after closing, when you realize there's no water line, no power grid, no dock, and no way to get supplies there without paying for it yourself every single time. Most people assume owning a private island is purely a billionaire fantasy, something so expensive it's not even worth thinking about. The truth is stranger. Plenty of islands are genuinely affordable to buy, which is exactly why so many buyers get blindsided by what comes next. This isn't really a real estate purchase. It's closer to founding a tiny, self-sufficient country with a population of one family. And understanding that distinction separates the owners who build something workable from the ones who buy their dream island and can't afford to actually live on it. So let's actually open the books on this one.
The reality check. From the outside, a private island looks like the ultimate luxury purchase. Turquoise water, your own beach, complete privacy, no neighbors, no rules. It looks like something only reserved for the ultra-wealthy, and when people do see the actual listing prices, it looks almost too good to be true. What's actually happening once you own one is closer to building and running your own private utility company from nothing. There's typically no municipal water supply, so you need a well, a desalination system, or shipped-in water. There's usually no power grid connection, so you're looking at solar, generators, or an expensive underwater cable if the island is close enough to the mainland. There's no road access, so every single delivery, building materials, food, fuel, furniture, arrives by boat or barge at a real per-trip cost. And depending on the country, you're dealing with a completely different set of property laws, environmental regulations, and sometimes even foreign ownership restrictions that a normal home purchase never touches. That's not a reason to avoid this. It's exactly why the buyers who do this successfully treat the island purchase as the smallest line item in a much bigger project, not the finish line. But here's what the numbers actually look like.
Chapter 1. Startup Costs. The island purchase price itself varies enormously depending on size, location, and existing infrastructure. Small, undeveloped islands in places like the Bahamas, Nova Scotia, or parts of the Pacific Northwest can list anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000 for a few acres with zero infrastructure. Islands closer to major markets, or ones that already have a dock, a well, and some power infrastructure, commonly run $1 million to $5 million. Fully developed private islands with an existing home in more desirable locations like the Caribbean or coastal British Columbia can run well past $10 million. But here's the part that catches almost every first-time buyer off guard. Infrastructure costs routinely exceed the purchase price of the island itself. A basic dock or pier, essential for getting people and supplies on and off the island at all, typically costs $50,000 to $250,000, depending on water depth and materials. A solar power system with battery storage sufficient for a modest home can run $40,000 to $150,000, while running an undersea power cable from the mainland, where feasible at all, can cost anywhere from a few $100,000 to well over $1 million, depending on distance. Water systems, a drilled well, a rainwater catchment system, or a small desalination plant commonly add another $20,000 to $200,000. Here's what most people miss. Because most islands fall outside normal municipal zoning and utility districts, buyers often need specialized environmental surveys, septic system approvals,
and sometimes country-specific foreign ownership permits before they can build anything at all. And depending on jurisdiction, that permitting process alone can take 1 to 3 years before a single foundation gets poured.
Chapter 2. Revenue Streams. A private island doesn't have to sit as a pure expense. A growing number of owners turn their island into a genuine revenue-generating asset, and there are several distinct ways this works. Short-term rental income is the most common path. Private island rentals booked through specialized platforms and boutique agencies can command anywhere from $500 to $5,000 plus per night, depending on size, amenities, and location. And because the entire draw is total privacy and exclusivity, islands can command a premium over comparable beachfront property that isn't fully secluded. Event hosting is a significant secondary revenue stream for islands with the right infrastructure. Weddings, corporate retreats, and small exclusive gatherings can command substantial day rates precisely because there's no other property on the market offering that level of privacy for a group. And this segment has grown as more people see genuinely unique, photograph-worthy venues. Film and media location licensing is a smaller but real niche. Production companies pay location fees to shoot on private islands specifically because they offer controlled access and a look that's nearly impossible to replicate on a public beach. Land appreciation is the final, longer-term piece of the puzzle. Undeveloped land in desirable coastal regions has historically appreciated meaningfully over time, and an island with proper infrastructure already built out is worth substantially more to the next buyer than the raw, undeveloped land was originally. Here's the number that surprises most people. Because operating costs on an island are largely fixed regardless of whether it's rented out or sitting empty, even a modest number of rental bookings a year can meaningfully offset ongoing expenses, which is exactly why more private island owners have shifted toward at least partial rental use, rather than treating the property as purely personal. Chapter 3. Operating costs. Now to what actually eats into any revenue the island generates, and this is where island ownership becomes genuinely unlike owning any mainland property. Transportation is a constant, recurring cost that most buyers underestimate badly. Every trip to and from the island, for the owner, guests, staff, or supplies, requires a boat, and depending on distance from the mainland, that can mean fuel costs, boat maintenance, or hiring a captain, adding up to real recurring expense that a mainland property simply doesn't have. Maintenance costs run notably higher than comparable mainland property because salt air, humidity, and constant marine exposure accelerate wear on everything from roofing to metal fixtures to boat equipment itself, and because contractors typically charge a premium for travel time and equipment transport to reach an isolated location. Staffing is another real line item for owners who aren't there full-time. A caretaker or property manager to handle security, basic maintenance, and emergency response typically runs $30,000 to $80,000 a year, depending on location and scope of responsibilities. Insurance is a genuinely significant cost too, since insuring an isolated property against storm damage, flooding, and fire, where a fire department obviously can't respond the way it would on the mainland, commands meaningfully higher premiums than standard homeowners coverage. And in hurricane-prone regions like the Caribbean, that premium climbs further still. Here's the retention hook worth remembering. Because almost every cost category on an island carries a built-in remoteness premium, a repair that might cost a few $100s on the mainland can easily run several times that once you factor in barge transport for materials and travel time for contractors, which is exactly why successful island owners build a genuinely padded maintenance reserve rather than budgeting like they would for a normal second home.
Chapter 4. Profit Margins and Real Numbers. So, what's actually left over for owners who do treat their island as an income-generating property? Industry figures from boutique island rental agencies commonly cite gross rental yields, annual rental income as a percentage of the island's total invested value in the 5 to 10% range for well-managed properties in desirable locations, which is respectable for a real estate asset, but requires genuinely active management to achieve. Let's run a real example. Take an island with a total invested value of $2 million, including the purchase price and infrastructure build-out, generating rental income of 100 nights a year at an average rate of $2,500 a night. That's $250,000 in annual gross rental revenue. Operating costs, transportation, maintenance, staffing, and insurance combined typically run around 55% of gross rental revenue for a well-managed island property, roughly $137,750 in annual costs.
Subtract those costs from revenue,
$250,000 minus $137,500, and that leaves roughly $112,500 in annual net income, a gross rental yield of about 5.6%, right at the lower end of that healthy 5% to 10% industry range. Here's what separates a genuinely profitable island operation from one that just breaks even. Occupancy matters more than nightly rate, and here's why. A meaningful chunk of those operating costs, staffing and insurance, stay largely fixed whether the island books 60 nights or 140 nights a year, while only transportation and maintenance actually scale up with each additional booking. Push occupancy from 100 nights to 140 nights at that same $2,500 rate, and annual revenue climbs to $350,000. But because the fixed portion of costs barely moves, total operating costs only rise to around $162,500, not the full 55% you'd expect if everything scaled proportionally. That leaves roughly $187,500 in net income, a yield of over 9%, close to the top of the industry range, purely from booking more nights on the exact same underlying asset. This is exactly why experienced island owners obsess over occupancy and marketing reach far more than they obsess over the nightly rate itself. Chapter 5: Risks and what makes someone succeed or fail. Now, the honest part, this is a genuinely unusual asset class, and it carries real risks worth naming clearly. Weather and natural disaster exposure is the single biggest threat, particularly in hurricane-prone regions like the Caribbean, where a single major storm can cause serious structural damage or completely cut off access for weeks, and rebuilding on an isolated property takes meaningfully longer and costs more than an equivalent mainland repair. Access and logistics risk is a constant, quieter drain. A broken boat engine or bad weather can strand an owner, staff, or paying guests, turning a simple supply run into a real logistical problem with no easy backup option. Liquidity risk is genuinely significant too. Private islands represent a tiny, specialized market with a limited pool of interested buyers, which means reselling one, even a well-developed one, can take considerably longer than selling a comparable mainland property, and pricing has to reflect that limited buyer pool rather than typical real estate comparables. But here's what actually separates owners who make this work from ones who end up regretting the purchase: treating the island as an active operation from day one rather than a passive dream purchase. The most successful owners build genuine redundancy into their power and water systems, work with experienced property managers who specialize in remote or island properties specifically, and price rental use realistically enough to actually offset the real costs of ownership, rather than assuming the island will simply sell itself as a rental. The owners who struggle usually made one of two mistakes. They underestimated infrastructure and remoteness costs so badly that the island became a financial burden rather than an asset. Or they bought purely on emotion without any plan for how the property would be maintained or used when they weren't personally there. This is a purchase built for people who want to run a small, self-sufficient operation, not people looking for a maintenance-free vacation home. Everything here is general business education, not financial, legal, or investment advice. Private island ownership involves complex, jurisdiction-specific property law, environmental regulation, and sometimes foreign ownership restrictions that require specialized legal and financial guidance well beyond anything covered here. What's clear from the numbers is that a private island isn't really a real estate purchase in the traditional sense. It's closer to founding a tiny, self-sufficient operation, and the winners are the ones who budget for the infrastructure and remoteness costs as seriously as they budget for the island itself. So here's my question for you. Would you rather own a private island as a genuine income-generating asset or as a pure personal retreat with no expectation of ever making money back? Tell me which you choose and why in the comments.